just finished a marathon meeting of the National Economic Council, and we're here to share some thoughts in terms of the key highlights of the deliberations. As you are aware, the National Economic Council is the highest advisory body on the economy to the President. And the Council met, and key issues on the table happen to be the topic of the moment. And that is how do we cushion the effects or the impacts of the PMS subsidy removal, as well as the convergence or the floating of the Naira on the citizens of Nigeria. And Council, I think every member, Council quite understands, deeply understands the impacts of the inevitable disruptive change that had to happen with regards to these two major changes that have happened. And we understand the impact on the 225 million Nigerians, especially in respect to price inflation, transport costs, food prices, on declining real incomes, and then, of course, job losses, impacts on businesses. And in fact, everybody is affected one way or the other. Even governments are also affected because the changes in exchange rate affects the stock of external debt in Naira terms, as well as debt service payments, and then also, of course, government also, the fuel vehicles and the rest. So we deliberated on all of this, and before today, the last NEC meeting, NEC had set up an ad hoc committee to evaluate these impacts and vis-a-vis the potential fiscal surplus that might be available. Because the first thing you do if you're asking government to do this is to ask how will government fund it. So we started our ad hoc committee had to do some estimate of the potential fiscal surplus that might arise as a consequence of these changes and, of course, improvements in the efficiency of revenue collection. Let me be clear that while we are also conscious of the fact that the economy needs a massive injection of resources, we face a paradox that we also have to be restraining because prices are also rising. There is a magnitude to which you pump in money into the system, and then inflation even gets higher. Exchange rate depreciates the more. And the more the exchange rate depreciates, the more there will be pressure for pump price of fuel to also rise. So Council is fully aware of all this. We're juggling many balls in the air at the same time. And consequently, I'm sure the first thing to really say is that contrary to the widely reported news item that FAC was going to distribute 1.9 or 2 trillion and so on trending, I think it's been agreed in order to moderate all of this, the possible impact of the shock on the system to distribute, I think, barely just 900 billion of that. And so it's not the 2 trillion that people have. But in thinking about how government should respond, federal, all the 3 tiers of government, Council also agreed that all the 3 tiers of government must do certain things, must begin to be, responsive to the mood of the nation, to the sufferings of the people, and try to do something to ameliorate the impacts. Obviously, each acting in accordance with its own fiscal space, in accordance with its own capacity to do so. While also we noted the need for governments at all levels to demonstrate empathy and, of course, be also part of being responsive is to aggressively address the issue of the cost of governance more broadly, generally sensitive to the times that we are in. And so, and in doing this, some principles were agreed to balance between investment and consumption, that if we have any fiscal surplus that is generated, that we must balance, have an appropriate balance between what part of it to consume in the immediate versus what proportion of it to invest for medium to longer term structural changes that we need to impact. And I think some of our colleagues will be addressing these aspects. And we also, the issue of a balance between this immediate need to push a lot of resources into the system versus the concept of sustainability. The pressure to make commitments. We'll be careful that we don't make commitments that will be difficult to unwind if some of the parameters change tomorrow. If oil price were to crash to $50 or to $30 tomorrow, meanwhile you have made some commitments that are difficult to begin to unwind immediately, we are also mindful of that. And consequently, quite a number of suggestions have been made in terms of how we go, part of which I would just run through quite a few of them, and my colleagues will be more than glad to then take up the others. For example, no, maybe I just read this bit.
Okay. I'll share that with them.
Or you,
I'll share that with
you share this, okay. But before I hang up on that, to let my colleagues to now take up the specifics of some of the specific suggestions we made, is one major item there in terms of now still talking about consumption and investment. And we agreed that there is a need for massive investment in infrastructure, that there is a huge infrastructure deficit across the land. And even Council agreed for the federal government interventions, for us to select some very major critical federal highways around the country, for immediate intervention. And then states and local government as well to pay attention to several of these, and particularly that affect supply side of the economy. Something like investing in rural roads that get to agricultural areas and so on to boom up agri production, as the case may be. I think at this moment I'm to yield to my colleagues to take some other aspects of the key decisions that we, the Council, reached today. Thank you very much.
Like Prof. Had rightly shared with us, we had very engaging and robust deliberations today, and it was all centered around the steps that we should be taking as a country towards cushioning the effect of the subsidy removal and also the unification of the Naira. As we have all seen in the last couple of days, the price of petrol has slightly elevated, and we know that the petrol has been deregulated, so obviously this was not the doing of the federal government or anyone. The pricing of petroleum products is now subject to market forces. And obviously, as the price of crude changes or the exchange rate varies, you will see that reflect in the price of petroleum products. But be that as it may, as a responsible government, we extensively deliberated on immediate steps in appreciation of the fact that our people are already feeling the pains of these very laudable and noble steps, and have been very patient with this administration. To that extent, a subcommittee of National Economic Council was set up, and that subcommittee reported some of the things that the governor of Anambra had shared with us, and that their report is now the proposal of National Economic Council. And amongst what His Excellency Governor of Anambra has shared with us, we also proposed accordingly that each state should begin to plan towards implementing a cash transfer program that will be based on their social register of the states, because it is states that are better positioned to do that enumeration so they can ensure the integrity of the social register. And again, it was also proposed by the council that we should implement a cash award policy for all public servants. What's a cash award policy? That would be a policy that allows each subnational to actually pay the public servants a certain prescribed amount of cash on a monthly basis.
For 6 months.
And it was prescribed that that should be implemented for 6 months in the first instance. And you'll be wondering, why 6 months? The idea is that as much as we're also particular about ameliorating the pains of our people immediately, a lot of sustainable measures are being put in place. And it is our hope that within now and the next 6 months, those sustainable measures would have begun to be visible. And then we can begin to taper down these cash awards. These cash awards, by the way, would be funds that will be placed in the hands of civil servants that will be tax exempt. We also talked about ensuring that we paid our public servants outstanding liabilities, whichever way, if it's their pension, if it's their gratuities, if it's their leave bonuses, and so on and so forth. And that is a front burner item because we believe that this would immediately bring succor to our people. We also spoke about the fact that the government must now begin to look at how to fund MSMEs because they are the engine room of business. And we should look at how to fund them with single-digit interest loans. And that is also something that's also a front burner that we believe that once that happens, because when you look at the percentage of civil servants or public servants in every state, they are just a trickle. But these kind of measures would also ensure that these interventions trickle down to MSMEs. We also spoke about the immediate implementation of our energy transition plan, which is transiting from being reliant on petrol to now being reliant on other fuels that are cheaper and more stable, particularly CNG, since we have an abundance of gas in Nigeria. So it is recommended that states will begin a plan to begin to convert their mass transit buses, their taxi vehicles to CNG. And that just requires that engineers are gotten that understand this, the kits are brought in, and this will also create employment as well. The long-term vision of government is for us to begin to use EVs, electric vehicles, but because government wants to ensure that we actually set up the manufacturing and assembly plants in each zone in the country, and that might take anywhere between 6-8 months to 1 year. The idea is to begin to implement the conversion to CNGs in the meantime, while EVs take over. So these are the immediate steps that was discussed and proposed at NEC this afternoon to ensure that our citizens have an understanding that indeed we are also as worried as they are, and they will begin to see these initiatives implementation immediately. Thank you very much.
There are other takeaways that the NEC really discussed in terms of giving a broader, more encompassing intervention to all the sectors and all the segments of the society. Food is a key component of what is on the table in terms of food security, the escalation of prices of foodstuff, and so on and so forth. And it was gladdening because NEC engaged with NEMA, with the CBN, and indeed with the Ministry of Agric. And we have some buffer stock that is already there with NEMA, and the Council has directed the states will be allocated immediately substantial portion of food items, grains, and so on and so forth for distribution, so that the prices of foodstuff will come down and it will be given at a subsidized rate or at the rate at which it is acquired from NEMA, because it is free. Of course, CBN also, because of their Anchor Borrower program and the program they had in agriculture, they have a large stock of rice and other grains that are going to make available within 1 week, so that they will be distributed to the states. And the states are at liberty to give it at a subsidized rate, give it free, or sell it at the level that at least it will crash the prices of foodstuff, or bring it to the level of affordability, to the threshold of affordability by the common people, so that across the sectors of the economy, public servants, civil servants, even farmers will benefit maximally. Again, as I said, NEMA has a lot of stock that is also bringing out, so that this particular aspect of food security and comfort and cushion to all Nigerians across the board would be achieved, and this will be done within 1 or 2 weeks. NEC was unanimous across all sort of persuasion that this initiative is bringing prosperity, and that it will be managed very well in terms of making sure that all the discomforts are done away with. And we need to engage with our organized labor as governors, so that there will be fidelity, there will be transparency, and everybody will understand that there is no delusion or deception in the implementation of this. Certainly there are some fears here and there, but they are going to be ameliorated. Thank you very much.
You know, the first question that was raised is in relation to cost of governance. I think it's an omnibus concept, and it's not something you sit down in a meeting to legislate for each and every person, for each and every state. But the fact that the council recognizes that this is an issue that each government, each tier of government should now focus on as an area of concern, that we must mustn't, even the cost of running the state and the way even we live. Someone gave an example of a convoy of a state governor going with 20-something vehicles in a convoy, and all this have to be fueled, and so on and so forth. And the fact that we are, even amongst ourselves, almost like in a peer review kind of setting, talking to ourselves, hey, gentlemen, we need to be sensitive to the times. We need to live within the average of the people that we are governing, and so on and so forth, and bring several of the, knock off the wastes and the irrelevances, so to speak. I mean, I like to give you a simple example. We're not going to legislate it for everybody. It's everybody to go and look into his mind. When I assumed the office, for example, it was costing about 137 million every month to do, clean up offices, public offices, and so on. Today in Anambra, we do it 11 million a month from 137 on a monthly basis. Just an illustration. And it's a moral, it's a thing that we're persuading each and every one of us to look into, what, check into our books and, look ourselves in the mirror and move with the times. It's not that the council start to begin to prescribe. You have 12 number of advisors or 5, and this. We didn't get to that, but each person will do that. Second thing I'd like to respond to, and maybe my colleagues might add something, is in relation to the social register that has been mentioned. I think at the council today, there was almost near unanimity among members that there is a big question mark about the integrity of the so-called National Social Register. People have questions about how those names in the register were brought about. I'm sure one questioner here asked whether it is for the most vulnerable group or so on and so forth. But let me even give you an example. If you Just think about it. They talk about a social register, and they are distributing things through the social register digitally, by digital means, implying that these people already, they have account numbers and they have phone numbers. They must be talking about some other people, not Nigerians. The poorest 25 percentile of Nigerians are largely, if not totally, unbanked, and they don't have access even to your telephones. It's the poorest of the poor of our society. Now, in thinking through that, we felt that sitting in Abuja and calling on somebody in Anambra to compile a list and send to you, and then the person depends on who he brings, and you get a register. The registers are generated, and so there. And people go to those villages and ask, where are those people? And people don't show up. This is stress testing it, and we think that we need to go back to the drawing board. And if you are delivering any such national or federal program from Abuja, it needs to be delivered via the constituent governments that are there at the roots, and each will now generate using their own formal and informal mechanisms to generate a register that is comprehensive, that is, meets certain criteria that you can stress test, and you can call out the people in the village, and everybody will confirm that these are the vulnerable people, if you are targeting vulnerable people, as it were. So the integrity test is what is missing with that register. Many have described what is being touted as national register as either bogus. Some describe it as phantom. Some describe it as in all manner of terms. So we need to face the problem, the fact that we don't have a credible register, and get back to work on this. And by the way, there's something that I think my colleague missed out as part of those recommendations over the medium, longer term, and that is the possibility of negotiating a new minimum wage. Yeah, that obviously will be on the table, but that has to be negotiated through the appropriate structures for doing that over time.
We looked at that as a medium to long-term measure. We are more focused on the immediate-term measures that would bring succor and relief to the life of our people. The question that was asked, and I'll take it in no particular order, the marketers were here sometime about a month ago. I facilitated that visit because I used to be a marketer before I became governor. However, I'm not sure that I'm competent to be holding brief for the marketers. However, I know reliably that the marketers were determined that they will supply or provide 100 buses as a show of support to the federal government, that they indeed are aligned with the policy of subsidy removal. And they wanted to trailblaze by showing that example and hoping that other sectors will follow suit. They decided that they were going to buy the vehicles that are locally made. They were not interested in bringing in vehicles from outside the country because they felt that this will also at least help in terms of employment generation. And I believe that the problems they're having right now is that the supplier, the local supplier of the vehicle, has not been able to live up to the expectations. But I'm sure that they are still deeply committed to ensuring that they supply the vehicles. Now, someone asked a question and said that the common man today is not able to go to work because of the increase in prices of petrol. And what are we thinking of doing about that? And I think that has been answered by all of us in different ways. The cash awards I mentioned is one of the first and immediate steps to ensure that people are able to cope better. Like I said, it's an allowance that will not be taxable. It is also not going to be pensionable, And like I said, it is an immediate term to a medium-term intervention. So by the time we have what Council discussed today was an ambitious plan of ensuring that we have over 10,000 buses in Nigeria that are being powered by electricity, 10,000. And the Vice President began to give examples and said, if 1,000 buses are sent to Lagos, for example, if Port Harcourt has 500 buses, definitely the question you raised will no longer arise. But in the meantime, we must transit to that. That is why we are all going to be embarking on that transition from petrol to CNG. We in Ogun State have already started that. And you begin to see other states in the Federation do the same. We are also starting our own, what we call e-mobility. All our Okadas and tricycles are also going to be running on electricity, and everybody's going to follow suit. So, yes, there's going to be some pain, but like they say, there's no gain without some pain. So, to answer your question, I believe that the cash awards would, go towards ameliorating the cost of transportation by those that need to go to work. Thank you very much.
I've just compared with the acting governor of CBN. They have more than 252,000 metric tons of grains and almost equivalent number of bags of fertilizer that will be distributed within the time frame. As for agriculture, everybody knows they have the buffer stock program where they have silos and they are all brimming with grains. They have not given us the quantity, and I don't want to be presumptuous. The same thing with the NEMA, because all their stores are there. As for the distribution mechanism, we have established a robust agreement that the states will be involved, local government will be involved. NEMA are going to collaborate with the corresponding institutions in the states and local government, that is SEMA, so that this thing will be done seamlessly. And in most cases, these bags will be further divided from the large bags of 50 kg to distributable weight, so that everybody will get it and it will cascade to all the nooks and crannies of the state where people live. The takeaway is that we have recognized the need for transparency. All members of the society will be involved. The CBOs, the NGOs, the civil society groups, everybody will be involved in this because the states are involved. And of course, at the end of the day, you will see that this thing will reach their target. And so the number for CBN is known, but for that of Agric and NEMA is already taken for granted, because these are statutory bodies that have been stocking grains during harvest, and they already have so much in their stock, and the Vice President said they should unleash them immediately, and the state will be involved in the mechanism. Minister of Agri to have, I forgot to mention, apart from foodstuff, they have fertilizer, they have chemicals, they have all the other farm implements that are required to boost food production and then improve or increase yield, and therefore provide food security. All this will be distributed during the period, and it is within the span of 1 or 2 weeks. Yes. But, no, let me mention that. No, well, I have been the issue. The state governments are buying, but that of NEMA, it has always been a system where they give. But for the CBN, because they have collected those grains and fertilizer from those who collected loans from them, we are buying. But as I said at the beginning, states are at liberty to give subsidy, to give it either free or at the market price, or subsidize it so that we will bring it to the threshold of affordability and crash the prices in the market. This is the immediate takeaway, as I said.
It's important to make this point pointedly, clear. It's the NEC meeting that just finished, and there are layers of work going on the economy. I'm sure the federal economic team is working hard on what the federal government will and could do. The states are also doing their own bit, and so also the local governments. Now, what we have put out here about what a menu of things that we encourage the tiers of government to implement in accordance with their respective fiscal space and fiscal capacities. the federal, the state, and the local government. And we did highlight as well that there is quite some fiscal surplus that will be coming to the states and local government and the federal government. And there we've suggested it would be nice that you can implement cash transfers subject to your financial capacity, some peculiarities. Some might be able to do, one might be able to do 1, some might be able to do 10, some might be able to do 20, as the case may be. It depends on their own capacity. Maybe there may be a state, or there may be some that are not even in a position to do that now. For example, if you have a state that has been owing, where salary arrears workers have been owed for 3 years or owed for 4 years, and the priority now is to even start paying down some of the salary arrears, or where pensioners have been owed their pension and gratuity for 7 years, for example. The priority now might be to use part of the surplus to pay that. Then, but there are also states that are with bumper harvest, and they could say, you know what? I want to deploy a chunk of this to implementing cash transfer and several of the other immediate programs. And that's why we couch this point that this is ultimately still a federation. And the various states and local governments and federal government are at different levels in terms of their fiscal space and fiscal capacity. So, states, local government, federal government, depending on their resource, if the federal government decides to do the same cash transfer, for example, we're recommending that they should do so using the framework of the states and local government that are nearer to the people, so to speak. That's basically that. So we didn't sit down there to begin to say, okay, this one, your cash transfer will be like what is being bandied in the media, whether it's 8,000 or 10,000 or 1,000 or whatever. It will depend on what the state, if the state can afford it, and what they can afford. And I guess this is very important that we communicate this clearly. Thank you very much.